Taiwan has become strategically important for US stock markets, the US government, and also...
There is an argument that China already is the global superpower.
But even the UK's built something called Dragonfire, right?
Yeah.
Which basically is a giant laser.
It's like Austin Powers.
It's like Star Wars. It's literally a giant laser that they strap on.
So when we were researching this was pretty mind-blowing for a lot of different reasons. But it turns out China have been hacking Russia, of all people. We always look at hacks the other way around. I suppose the question around that is, what is it? What's the hack? What have they been doing? And is it going to avert World War III?
Yeah, so James, when I found out about this, a Chinese hacking group connected to the Chinese government, paid for by the Chinese government.
Yeah. One of many, many, many Chinese hacking groups.
Yeah, exactly. But they had been found to, since the start of the Ukraine war in 2022, they had actually been hacking Russian military to find out their secrets about, you know, drones, radar, about nuclear submarine capability and where they are. And it's astounding because all we hear or have heard constantly is this really close relationship between Russia and China.
Yeah.
And it's mental, like...
Well, this is what we're fed from the US, right?
Well, yeah, but also everyone else, you know, if you think about EU leaders, they're like, oh, Russia and China are the big threat, you know. But the interesting thing as well was it was found that the FSB, had also created an 8-page document suggesting that China is an enemy of Russia.
Yeah. Now, the FSB is the Russian Secret Service.
Secret intelligence, whatever you like to call it.
Yeah.
So it's really, really interesting in this world of geopolitics where we've got Trump, obviously very antagonistic towards, well, pretty much every country, but more specifically Russia and China, and obviously Iran, because they're apparently connected and friends and everything.
So China hacking Russia, you know, all of this stuff, why does it matter from a market perspective?
Well, because we're going to talk a lot about, you know, geopolitics here, but geopolitics, if it starts to get really, really frothy, that equals volatility in the markets. That's when markets can dip really harshly. So we've got to be aware of all of these things so that we can properly plan for them and risk manage for them. Yeah.
And of course, from a market perspective, anything that creates volatility creates trading opportunity, right?
Exactly. But the other interesting thing is to do with what happened with the Iran bombing, because obviously he flew 7 stealth bombers into Iran, blew up their nuclear capability, and then it wasn't detected by Chinese or Russian radar.
Yeah. But isn't that the point of stealth bombers?
It is, yeah, absolutely. But you'd have thought that they would, I mean, they refueled in midair before they got there as well. So you'd have thought that there would have been some sort of capability these days to be able to do it. These B-2s are from like the 1960s or something like that. Like they're stealthy, yes, but, you know.
They're the stealthiest of all the stealth planes.
Yeah, exactly. But I think this brings into question something that not many people really tend to highlight, which is there are definitely fault lines in perceived alliances.
I think this is the interesting point around this, is because we always hear this, they're hacking these, and China's hacking everybody, Russia's hacking everybody, and then the West sit here all going, oh, don't hack them, you shouldn't be doing that, you shouldn't be doing that. Now, the reality is everybody's hacking everybody, right? There is intelligence, spies, whatever, everybody is hacking everyone all of the time. Yet, what we're talking about here is the diplomatic way these things then come out and how they're perceived, right? Now, from that perspective, obviously within the question, we're talking about how we avert World War III. Does this avert World War III because that China, well, we're not saying it officially does, and we're not saying that World War III is coming anytime soon, but does it make it just derails that whole scary, from a media perspective, that scary China-Russia relationship, which is so great?
Well, I think so. And also the interesting thing is there's been zero retaliation after that Iran bombing, even though Iran is an ally of both Russia and China, right?
Yeah.
So what is the true story? This is the really interesting thing for me. And this is where geopolitics, and especially when everyone calls Trump stupid, it's where it becomes really, really, really interesting, because it's like, what does the US know, for instance, on this relationship? Are they being this sort of bullish on being I guess, antagonistic because they know Russia and China aren't truly friends.
The Iranian, talking about the retaliation previously, so that Iranian retaliation on the US, the politest airstrike of all time, where they let them know what was coming, when it was coming, how to get rid of them, how to intercept them. Everything was known, right? And we saw, looking at this from a trading perspective, we saw that in oil markets, the complete reverse of all of those moves higher, where oil just decided that, actually this is all completely under control. But it shows you, and this is, this whole thing of we're all just living in a simulation where everyone's just, the media are dictating this side, the media are dictating that side. If we move this on, so Trump has spoke about the BRICS alliance, right? And if you're a country which is going to side yourself with the BRICS countries, well, you're going to be hit with more tariffs, right? So from this perspective, does that China-Russia relationship, or the question then around that China-Russian relationship, does it undermine the whole BRICS movement itself?
Well, the other thing as well, which is interesting, is that India and China seem to keep having skirmishes on the border. And obviously India's part of the BRICS. It's the I in the BRIC. Yeah. And so
India puts the I in the BRICS.
Yeah, exactly. So there's this perceived notion that all of these guys are friends. Brazil is the other one in LATAM. But even Brazil now moving, a little bit, I don't know, they're quite cross-winded in terms of their politics. They went from Bolsonaro to the new guy, and it's all a bit mad. But I think the interesting thing is definitely that there are sort of mini skirmishes, with China and Russia, there's the hacking. With India, there are, battles going on, not necessarily gunfights. Apparently there were like stones thrown and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But, there are these little kind of frictions that keep happening. And I don't think the BRIC alliance is that strong.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of reasons for that, which I think we'll get onto just in a second when we start talking about the US a little bit more.
Yeah.
But in terms of undermining it, I definitely think that there has been a considerable amount of undermining of the relationship. Not so much in terms of Russia and India, but definitely China versus the other two.
Yeah.
100%. The reason I say that as well is because obviously India was buying oil from Russia to be able to then sell it on into the EU and things like that. So they've been a fantastic facilitator, but there are still obvious frictions that are going on in the entire relationship.
Is there not this... Because I've always taken the view, really, that China is the outlier globally.
Yeah.
Really. China and the US are the two overall outliers in this situation. Now, if you forget the US and focus on the BRICS for now, Russia has its own problems. We know economically Russia is in big trouble. The war has obviously not helped that, but they're also in conflict. Mm-hmm. China is the huge outlier because it is a juggernaut, right? It in terms of everything goes through China. The same way you could say from a Western perspective, everything goes through the US, but actually not everything goes through the US. There is an argument that China already is the global superpower.
I'd have a contention with that only because Chinese GDP per capita is about $12,500. The US is about $80,000.
Yes.
It always comes back to that for me. We see Shanghai, Beijing, Guangzhou as the cities in the media. There is a whole other side to China that is rural, that is extreme poverty, that is very, very primitive. You don't get that in the US. You go to the Midwest US.
There's still extreme poverty.
Exactly, but it's not rampant. It's not like, as if people are living in, little stone houses and stuff like that. I think there's a massive, massive divide in China in terms of, okay, you've got these really, really high-tech cities, but then you've got a lot of other people.
But there would also be the perspective is actually, and this is going to sound really callous, and actually it's not meant that way, but from a Chinese perspective, from their view and their outward-looking view, does the Chinese government really care about that rural side of China? You talk about the major cities which dominate not just the Chinese economy, but the BRICS economy in that area. Like every country, aside of that country which isn't necessarily contributing to its growth, but it doesn't need to.
Well, no, probably not, because yeah, at the end of the day, it's a capital control country. They're effectively self-sufficient in that way. There's inward investment, but it's relatively just pumped up by, the PBOC at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So I guess they don't need to focus on it like other economies, but it would be nice for the people there if they did.
When we talk about China, we talk about Russia, we talk about who these superpowers are. We've mentioned China, but is the US still the overall superpower, which is going to police the world? Now, I think there's two sides to this. I think there is a Donald Trump-run United States, and then there is if you look previously in the Biden administration, or the Democratic administration, with either one, US is still the world superpower, right?
Yeah,
and still still policing the world, but Trump's doing that on a far more aggressive basis, and you could even say in a more successful way.
this chart in front of us here basically shows the amount of debt that China and Japan want to own, US treasuries, that is, or US debt in total, actually. Now, this does not change. They might switch the composition, so they might go from US treasuries to, US mortgage-backed securities, sometimes, US municipal debt, so state debt, basically.
Yeah.
But it remains relatively constant. Now, the one thing I always say to people, if you want to stop betting on the US, you are effectively betting on other countries not wanting to hold US debt.
Yeah.
And they still want to hold it.
Yeah, never going to happen.
They do not want to hold it. And so it is the obvious destination for countries to hold their dollars in, because they do so much trade with the US. So basically the way trade works, you go and buy something from China, you're swapping your cash for yuan in effect for that good. Mm-hmm. China then has to hold those dollars, but they want to get a return on it. What's the easiest way to get a return in the most liquid way? Go then and buy US treasuries with those dollars. Mm-hmm. So that's the best way to do things. And so until the US stops being a consumer, which is the most powerful consumer, the only way that is going to stop is if something internally really, really breaks with the US, in which case your best bet is to stop focusing on markets and start focusing on where you're going to get the cleanest water source from. Yeah. Because if that day happens, then everything goes kaput. Yeah.
I mean, from a US perspective, and I mean, if we take this back to from a trading perspective, the US is the financial powerhouse of the world, right? So that's not gonna change from a trade perspective. We're not all gonna start trading Chinese backed stock markets and things like that, right? You're still going to look at US companies, and most importantly, companies are still going to IPO in the US, and that's the be all and end all of any financial discussion, right? Big companies want to be in the US.
Exactly. It's the most liquid capital markets, biggest capital markets. There's no other option.
So let's move back to China for 1 minute. We look at Russia and Ukraine, and we look at the conflict we had there, but previous to that, the discussion was always around Taiwan and a potential Chinese invasion of Taiwan. Now, the US has always said that they would stand up for Taiwan. They would defend Taiwan if this ever became an issue. But why is Taiwan so important?
Well, it's become so important over the AI craze because Taiwan basically makes the chips for NVIDIA. Which ironically finds their way back to China, even though they're banned via Singapore, because it's not illegal to export to Singapore, but it is illegal
to go
to export
Taiwan
directly to
China, right?
Yeah. So there's a really, really interesting dynamic there, whereby Taiwan has become strategically important for US stock markets, the US government, and also US security. Because if you remember the DeepSeek saga, right, what it was actually found was that they managed to have that model because they bought so many NVIDIA chips. They bought so many H200 chips, which were the most powerful. Then I think Blackwell's coming out, which is more powerful. But there's a real, again, interdependence between nations here.
But this is the same situation that we had in Ukraine, but because of oil pipelines, right? That's why Ukraine was so important.
And rare earth minerals
and rare earth minerals, which US have done a deal with Ukraine on.
Yeah.
But with rare earth minerals and oil pipelines to Europe, that's why that was so important, and that's why there was so much talk that Ukraine would have been supported. Now, of course, the West and Europe in general are petrified of what Russia can do there. the US aren't necessarily as scared as going at China to protect Taiwan, or would they be?
Look, Taiwan's very well protected. China consistently do practice drills around Taiwan, and I think it's just a bit of chest pumping, to be honest.
Yeah.
China is never going to invade Taiwan, in my opinion. I think it is a massive strategic mistake considering the extent to which the US is backing Taiwan. It's also very, very difficult to invade an island nation.
Yeah.
Especially when the US has the capabilities to absolutely bomb the proverbial
absolute annihilation
out of them from very, very far away as well. So that strait just between China and Taiwan is very well protected. It's different to Ukraine because obviously Russia shares a border. It's literally just you drive a car and then you're in Ukraine. For China, they'd have to send all of their ships. They'd have to face the might of the US Navy and Air Force. And they just wouldn't stand a chance. There was something interesting that I found out about the, I think it's the F-25 airplane.
Yeah, fighter, yeah.
The US actually built that because they misunderstood the capabilities of China. They thought China had built a really, really extensive, powerful, high-tech airplane. And so the US just said, we've got to build something insane here. So they built the F-25, which costs about, I think it's like 100 million per plane or something. And they built it to such a high spec and standard that it's like generations above what China has.
This is just all what this is what the Cold War was, right? Exactly the same situation. Exactly. It was all about what you could make the other side believe you were capable of.
Exactly.
And that's still what everything's about now. But because they've all got, everybody's got weapons that could destroy the other side, but it's all about making these people understand or believe that you've got more than what you've got.
But even the UK's built something called Dragonfire, right? Which basically is a giant laser.
It's like Austin Powers.
It's like Star Wars. It's literally a giant laser that they strap onto warships, and then they can shoot like UAVs, drones, everything out of the sky.
Dr. Evil.
But this is the
Keir
UK.
Starmer's Austin Powers.
We're basically a third world country, and we've got that. Half of China is a third world country. And so, look, the power that the West has is so undermined, I think, by our own media as well. I think they don't understand a lot of the defense capabilities that we actually have. And I think it is absolutely key to note that the UK-American alliance is so high-tech that it would be very, very scary for Russia and China actually to engage in a war with us.
Let's just take this back to a trading perspective. The chart we've got here is Taiwan semiconductor manufacturing. Now, shock, this is just going one way. This is going up and to the right because these chips need to be built and they're under incredible amounts of demand.
And if you take it from a future expectations perspective, markets don't lie when they price in future expectations. Okay. The dip there that you could see was from tariffs. Now, if there was an actual credible threat of China invading Taiwan, do we think, and this is Taiwan listed, by the way, do we think that this stock would be trading up here if traders and investors?
I would say no.
There we go. The market does not lie. There might be periods of drawdowns like we saw with tariffs. However, that is a macroeconomic effect. Now, I don't know why I'd want to keep my capital in Taiwan if I truly thought there was an imminent threat from China on one of their largest listed companies.
And when you consider the likes of Nvidia and these companies are trillion-dollar companies, you think they would have some sort of inside knowledge that what's happening here.
And look, the other thing as well is that I think politicians are actually becoming some of the US tech giant CEOs. Jensen Huang has almost single-handedly been able to lobby Trump to get chips into China. Okay. So there is a power dynamic amongst these tech founders now because they know what the next 5 to 10 years looks like and how important it's going to be for the US, China, and all these other countries. Russia's going to get left behind. Absolutely. They've ostracized themselves here.
So we can answer that question. Do we think China is going to invade Taiwan?
No.
No. So I suppose the key point here, taking all this into account, is should investors be happy? And I suppose it's not necessarily happy, but do we see the same boom in US markets, I suppose, because that's where everyone's trading, US markets, gold, dollar. Do we see the same situation continuing?
Well, I'll say yeah, because geopolitical risk is what really spikes volatility these days.
Yeah.
It's that uncertainty, right? So if we're saying we don't think that Taiwan's going to be invaded by China, then that is taking a massive perceived geopolitical risk and putting it into our favor. What does that mean? The VIX remains flat because we're unlikely to see that event actually occur. However, what you can then say is, okay, well, the risk of cyber attacks increases. What does that mean? There's going to be an increased demand for cybersecurity software, cybersecurity services, infrastructure, architecture, whatever you want to call
And as
it.
if by magic, we've got a chart about this.
Yeah, I mean, CrowdStrike had that trouble just last year, didn't they?
Yeah.
However, since then, it's been an insane run.
Yeah, I mean, that chart is pretty mad.
Absolutely mental.
Yeah.
And it's only going to continue.
You've got your little tariff fall off like everyone has, but
Everyone
then
had that.
see you later.
Everyone had that. So I think cybersecurity is going to be an even bigger theme to watch over
Now,
the
a
next 5
few
years.
weeks ago, we were talking about quantum computing, right?
Yeah.
And the potential of what that does from a hacking perspective, like a hacker's dream, right?
Yeah.
Cybersecurity, again, another reason why these companies are massive
Exactly.
money.
It's an outperforming sector.
Yeah.
Absolutely outperforming sector. I wouldn't expect any dividends from them. I don't know what the dividend yield is. So if you're looking for income, probably go elsewhere apart from US markets. But, I think from a price return perspective, it's an exciting kind of niche theme. It's quite a broad theme these days, of course. But
Yeah.
it's something whereby you can look at some of these stocks and say, okay, well, I think that's going to go higher. Fortinet is another US cyber firm, which is doing pretty well at the moment as well. So, look, it's a theme that I really like, and it's based on a broader view of things. Not war breaking out, but these little online skirmishes that keep happening.
That happen on a daily, literally almost like a daily basis.
Exactly.
I mean, we've seen just in the UK, I think this week, 3 or 4 people were arrested about the Marks and Spencers and Co-op hack, which was, I mean, I'm amazed that story has gone so under the radar. I know it was quite big news, but I want to know how much Marks and Spencers have paid to keep that story as diluted as it was.
Well, the thing is, we tried to order sandwiches for my daughter's party. You know, the platters they do.
Yeah.
And they
Look at
said
him ordering sandwiches from Marks and Spencers.
they
Get down Costco like everyone else.
they said they couldn't do it because of the hack, and this was like 3 months after the hack. And I was like, how bad was this hack?
Yeah, you can't order a sandwich.
Can't order sandwiches for collect at store. What is going on?
Yeah.
But look, I think it's a fantastic theme.
Yeah.
There's a couple of fantastic themes that I think we'll cover over the next couple of weeks that are popping up.
Yeah.
And cyber is the one that's running now. The momentum's behind it.
And look at this chart. I mean, it goes back to, from the very start of the year, our trading strategy. Up and to the right.
It's all that matters.
Easy as that. So there you go. World War III's been averted, and it seems like global markets are going to continue in the same way. But do you agree? Like, subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.